The Fianna Fáil party, among others, is calling for a constitutional right to housing, something that sounds good but is bound to end in disaster. This is Ben Scallan and you're watching Gript Media. Fianna Fáil, which is obviously one of the parties currently in government, has called for a referendum to insert a right to housing into the Irish Constitution. We are calling for the right to housing to be included in the Constitution. As a party, the right to own your own home is a core belief, but we need to go further. It's about the state making a commitment to ensure that every citizen has access to a secure and affordable home. Now, we'll put aside the fact that they voted against this exact policy in 2019, just 2 years ago, and now they suddenly support it. You'd be forgiven for thinking that this was a party that believes in nothing and will say anything that they think will further their agenda at the time to stay in power. But regardless, we're here now and they've supported this right to housing policy. Now, I know what some of you are probably thinking. A right to housing sounds like a great idea, doesn't it? After all, as we all know, Ireland has a crippling housing crisis thanks to the failures of successive Fine Gael and Fianna Fáil governments. A report published by the Bank of International Settlements last year revealed that Ireland's house prices are currently the second least affordable in the developed world when you factor in people's income. It's no wonder then that housing was ranked as the most important issue for voters at the last election, tied with health. So with this in mind, maybe a right to housing would make sense, to force the government to knuckle down and house everyone. However, there are a few major problems with this proposal, especially in the context of some of the other government policies that they're trying to implement. For example, this is the same government that wants to give a pathway to citizenship to tens of thousands of illegal immigrants. Under their new scheme, Ireland's estimated 26,000 illegal immigrants resident in the state will be able to seek Irish passports. As Justice Minister Helen McEntee has said, successful applicants will receive immigration permission, access to the labour market, and can begin a pathway to citizenship. So in other words, if the right to housing was implemented, it would mean that the government would be forced by law to provide tens of thousands of houses at the taxpayers' expense for so-called undocumented migrants. And remember, when we're talking about illegal immigrants, these are people who broke the law by sneaking into Ireland under the radar of the authorities. We aren't talking about refugees or asylum seekers fleeing from war. These are people who hopped the fence in breach of Irish immigration policy and have no legal right to be here. And you will be paying God knows how much in taxes to build tens of thousands of free houses for this. But of course, in reality, it would be much more than tens of thousands, because believe it or not, there are an unlimited amount of people on earth who would love to be given a free house. Just think about the message that we'd be sending to the rest of the world. You can come into Ireland illegally, and even if we catch you, you'll be rewarded with citizenship, the right to work or draw the dole, and be given a free house. Everyone and their nan would have an absolute stampede on this country in an attempt to avail of this pathological altruism. But there's another element to this that needs to be considered, and that's that houses cost money. They're made of materials that cost money. There's labor and people's time and effort and skill that goes into building them. They're situated on land, which has a cost. So promising to give everyone a house doesn't make that goal any more achievable. What people don't understand about cost is that it's set largely by supply and demand. So if there are loads of people who want something, like a house for example, and there aren't that many houses to go around, the price will naturally go up as people compete for the few that are there. This is common sense. Therefore, the way you drive down the cost of anything, housing included, is by either increasing the supply so there are more of them, or decreasing the demand. The government could pass a new law tomorrow saying, from now on, all houses will cost €5 so everyone can afford them. Okay, but that statement doesn't create more houses or make them more available. It'd be like someone who's 5'1" changing his medical records to say he's 7'8". You can say whatever you like, but it doesn't change the underlying reality of the situation. In fact, if anything, giving houses away for free would remove the profit incentive, meaning there'd be no point for private building contractors to make them. So there'd actually be less houses being created, if that's even possible. And remember, the Constitution applies to all citizens. This doesn't just mean that poor people would get free houses, rich people, the children of billionaires, people who can afford houses but would just prefer a free one, all of them would be entitled to this as well. Ryan Tubridy would be able to get a free house off the state if he wanted. It would be an instant catastrophe. This is why a decent civics curriculum is so important for any society and why ours is severely lacking at school. People don't even know what a right is anymore. Something that's a finite resource can never be a right. Rights are things that you're born with, like your life and your ability to speak and think, not houses or ginger ale or Ford Fiestas. A right is something that you already have at birth, which the government is not allowed to take away from you. This is civics and the history of civilization 101. And the fact that our leaders can't grasp this very simple concept is truly baffling. Meanwhile, the left, or as bad or worse, People Before Profit has called on the state to override the right to private property and repeal it from the constitution to ensure the right to housing for every resident in Ireland, not even citizen, just someone who lives here.
We want to put the right to secure, affordable, dignified and appropriate housing into the constitution and make it a right for every person living in this country. And this particular bill seeks to delimit the protections that are given to private property in favour of the common good, which does allow, even under our constitution, the common good for the government to override private property rights.
The state overriding the fundamental right to private property for the quote-unquote common good. Now, maybe that sounds reasonable to some people. Ireland's housing crisis is so bad, wouldn't it be so easy to find someone who has 2 homes and give one to somebody else who has none? Does someone living in an 18-bedroom mansion need all those rooms? Think of all the homeless people you could house in a large house like that. There's just one problem with this, however. Why would we assume that a measure like this would stop at only the top 1% richest people in society? The right to private property will be abolished altogether for everyone, not just rich people. You, watching this video, would be included in this removal of rights. What this effectively would mean, if it was ever to pass, God forbid, is that you would have no actual right to private property that you own. If the state deemed it necessary, your house or a part of it could be seized and they could put, say, an illegal Albanian immigrant with a heroin addiction into the guest room of your house, just to give an extreme example. And you would have absolutely no legal recourse or constitutional right to object, as long as the quote-unquote public good demanded it. But who decides what the public good is? Well, the government, of course. And if the last year with COVID-19 has taught us anything, allowing the state to suspend our fundamental rights for the sake of the public good has worked out great, hasn't it? Paul Murphy complained that the government hides behind the Constitution on housing.
The government, for years, has hidden behind the Constitution. It's hidden its class interest, the class interest of those it represents, behind the Constitution, or has attempted to do so.
In reality, the Constitution is there to protect the people from self-described Marxists like Murphy and Boyd Barrett. They would be happy to seize all of our rights in the name of the greater good if they could get away with it. So yes, Ireland has a serious housing crisis. Yes, solutions are badly needed. But this nonsense is not the way to go about it. It was a horrible idea when PBP proposed it, it was a horrible idea when Sinn Féin proposed it, and it's still a horrible idea now that Fianna Fáil have jumped on the bandwagon. If you think the housing crisis in Ireland couldn't get any worse, implement this policy and watch the current crisis start to look like a picnic by comparison. Please like and share this video, and if you enjoyed it, please consider signing up for a monthly donation via the link on screen to help us produce more content like this. Alternative media like Gript needs all the assistance it can get, and every donation goes a long way. As always, thanks for watching.